Pleasure to be joined now by Jim Trotter, longtime NFL reporter. And Jim, I'd love to say that the sentiment that was expressed by John Gruden is something that we haven't seen across the NFL before. But unfortunately, this is the latest example of people in power in the National Football League saying one thing and doing another behind closed doors. But I want to start with just where things are right now with the Washington football team and their investigation. Where is the league in releasing what everyone is asking them to release?
The league is saying it's not going to release those emails. So at this point, it's just a stalemate. The league has said it has concluded its investigation into the Washington football team. It says it is comfortable with the discipline it levied in terms of a $10 million fine against owner Daniel Snyder and him ceding day-to-day control of the team for an indefinite period to his wife. So barring a change on, from the league standpoint, it is what it is at this point, which is both disappointing and not surprising, because the question I've asked is, what does it take for an owner to be bounced out of the league? If you have an owner who is facing or has faced over 40 sexual harassment allegations, meaning his organization has, he has settled with some of these people who have filed claims against his club. And then on the other hand, he oversees an organizational culture in which the team president, who is the second highest ranking member of the organization behind the owner, is engaged in racist, homophobic, and misogynistic language. What more does it take to get you bounced out of the league? So it's disappointing from my standpoint that the league hasn't taken more action against Daniel Snyder, but at the same time, I'm not surprised.
Why is this a strategy that the league would implement? Just saying, you know what, we're not going to do it.
I have no idea. I think, if I'm going to guess, and it's purely speculation here, the reason that I believe they won't turn over the rest of those emails or make them public is because of what else could be found in those emails and who else could be linked to those emails. One thing the league does, its mantra, if you will, is to protect the shield. And what we have seen in situations where there is a damning incident against the league is that they do everything to make sure that while it might be bad, it's not as bad as it could be from their standpoint. So what do I mean by that? Go back to the original Spygate case where the New England Patriots were accused and found to have been illegally videotaping opponents' practices. What did the league do? It destroyed all of the evidence after the fact. Why? Perhaps because they didn't want us to see just how bad this really was. And now let's fast forward to the Washington football team. They asked for an investigation, but did not request a written report in terms of the findings of the investigation, which is really unusual. Now, the league says it did it to protect the identities of those who have made claims against the team. But I would argue that's disingenuous at best. From this standpoint, when there is a legal case, let's say it's a rape case allegation or something else along those lines, what does the court do? It redacts the name of those who are making the claim, or it identifies them as, say, victim one or alleged victim one or alleged victim two. It removes their names. The league could have done that in this report if it so wanted to. My feeling is it didn't want us to know just how bad it really was.
So is it your sense then, and again, somewhat speculative, that John Gruden, the Washington football team, this misogynistic, pervasive kind of culture, that they are not the exception, but that perhaps, this is widespread systemic dysfunction across the league, and that's, what the Shield is ultimately trying to prevent from getting out there?
Oh, you would be the most naive of the naivest to say that John Gruden and Bruce Allen are alone in the way that they were communicating. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say this is widespread, but I do believe that it goes on beyond just those two individuals. The other point I will make here, and I've said this publicly, so I'm not speaking out of turn, I think what John Gruden's initial email about DeMaurice Smith reflects is an NFL culture that is so passive-aggressive against Black people within the NFL. And so why do I say that? Number one, if you look at the NFL in terms of its leadership, blacks simply aren't represented. You look at the league office where there are 11, I've been told 11 executive vice presidents. There are only 2 who are black. You look at our NFL media group where we cover a player population that is 70% black. We don't have one black person involved in the decision-making process of how we go about covering these men. You go onto the field, we know the numbers in terms of head coaching and GM hires and how there are so few blacks there. So what it says to me, or appears to say, is that, look, you can entertain us, you can play for us, you can even work for us. But when it comes to the highest levels of the NFL, there's just not a place at the table for you. And so I think that's something that the NFL has to address, because to me, what it says is this is something systemic, and it speaks to a culture in the NFL that is not welcoming to particularly black people when we talk about getting to the highest levels of the NFL.
What's it going to take, Jim, to have a seat at the table for black executives in the front office? You know, the disparity in coaching is something that's been documented but hasn't been adequately addressed. How does this problem get solved?
You know, I get asked that question a lot, and my first thought is, why is it incumbent on black people to fix a problem that they didn't create? Having said that, if you look at history, there have only been 2 ways that the NFL has ever made substantive change in terms of moving. One is through the threat of litigation, and we can go back to the early 2000s when the late Johnnie Cochran and Cyrus Mehri threatened to sue the league and challenge its antitrust exemption because of its discriminatory practices against people of color as it related to the hiring of head coaches. The only other time that I can find where the league moved on something was the Washington football team recently, with all of the allegations of sexual harassment, and we saw sponsors pulling out from that club, threatening to pull out, whether it was FedEx or others, and we saw the league take action. Those are the only 2 ways that I know of where you get substantive change within the NFL, and that is through the threat of legal action or the threat of sponsors pulling out.
Well, that is one thing that has been mentioned as it relates to the release of these emails, that those who are trying to fight for this, for the truth coming to light, have urged corporate sponsors to threaten to take action. I mean, is that a viable path to potentially force the NFL to take the next step in this with the Washington football team?
Absolutely. It's a viable path if those corporations are willing to do that. Remember, on those email chains with John Gruden, he was speaking to the owners of some corporations who were included on that chain. So how high does this really go? And that's why I say to you, that's why I don't believe that these emails are ever going to come to light, because they want to protect who's on it. And they don't want us to know just how bad or just how pervasive, you know, these attitudes are.
As it relates to Gruden specifically, what has the response been from the front office in Oakland about just how damning these emails were and the stain that will ultimately leave with his resignation?
In terms of the response with the Las Vegas Raiders, we haven't heard from the owner, from Mark Davis. They sent out their general manager, Mike Mayock, yesterday, but Mike Mayock doesn't have any authority in that organization. The only 2 people who had the real authority in that organization were the owner, Mark Davis, and John Gruden. So from that standpoint, none of us know, you know, how pervasive that was within the organization. We know that some of those coaches have been with John Gruden for a long time. And excuse me, I don't want to be one who makes guilt by association, but I have a hard time believing that John Gruden only said those things to Bruce Allen.
Forgive me, old habits die hard, the Vegas Raiders.
You're with me. I do the same thing. I'm a Bay Area native, so I find myself having to catch myself as well as with the see, I almost said it again. Those Chargers, I have to stop from saying San Diego.
So what do they need to do, you know, to right the ship, to move forward, to put this behind them, I guess? And, you know, should it be something that lingers? I find this a frustrating situation because it is such a toxic sort of culture league wide. And yet, as you just noted over the last couple of minutes, it doesn't seem like there are practical solutions at this point.
No, the first thing I would always say to you to correct any problem is to, one, acknowledge it and be transparent about it. And we haven't gotten transparency from the league or the team in this case. So that's why I say I don't know that you can correct it moving forward until you acknowledge it and until you be transparent about it and how you're going to go about correcting it. So I don't have the solution. And then, to be honest with you, there are times I say, it is not for me to decide how to correct this problem. If you want to put me in the commissioner's chair and you want to give me that title and you want to give me that salary and everything else that comes with it, then fine, I'll come up with a solution for you. But short of that, they're paid to come up with solutions to these problems.
Yeah, I think the burden, well, I don't know. I can't speak to it, but I would guess that the burden for players in the league, and especially, players who are progressive, who want change, that it is very heavy on them to feel like the impetus is on them to constantly have to advocate for themselves and not really, like you're saying, go out and do their job and leave it to the leaders who are supposed to be ensuring that they're okay. How frustrated are players in this league to be involved with organizations or just be involved in a league that says one thing about initiatives that they're taking as it relates to social justice, but quite clearly is doing another and not taking blatant steps at the executive and leadership level to correct systemic injustices?
First of all, I don't think we can make blanket statements as it relates to players. When we talk about nearly 2,000 players, obviously they don't all think the same way. Mm-hmm. I will say to you that players are very good at compartmentalizing and understanding that they have a job to do in terms of feeding their family, putting food on the table, and so they have to go out and do their work. What was interesting yesterday is that we heard Mike Mayock, the general manager of the Raiders, come out and say that Carl Nassib, who came out as openly gay this year, asked for a personal day because this was all, there was a lot for him to unpack here. And I have to be honest with you, I got messages from a few blacks in the league who said, imagine being a black man dealing with racism every day. We don't get to ask for personal days off. And so it was really striking for me to hear that, to see what if black players on that Raiders roster said, you know what, we need a day off or we need the week off. What would have happened? And I don't have the answer to that. I just know that it's real in terms of people who contacted me about it. So all I can say to you is history has shown that players are very good at compartmentalizing, about going out and doing their job, about trying to control the things that they can control. And this is something that was out of their control.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Making a sweeping generalization about players as a group is not necessarily fair or reflective of a league that has a lot of different players who believe a lot of different things. I appreciate your insight on that topic. I do just want to ask you about the Chargers before I let you go, and just a couple of other kind of big picture topics away from this. When you look at what the Chargers have done, they're obviously creating a lot of buzz right now. How much credit does their head coach deserve for the success that they've had in the development of their quarterback?
In terms of their success, I think he deserves a lot of credit. I'm not going to say I was on the fence about Brandon Staley, but I just didn't know because there really isn't much to go on with him. I mean, 1 year as a defensive coordinator, 5 years ago, he's coaching at the small college football level. So it was kind of like, is this too much too soon? And having attended their game against the Raiders, having looked at some of his press conferences this week, I texted someone in the organization last night and I said, I hope Brandon Staley never changes. He is thoughtful. He is thorough. He is open-minded when it comes to the ways that things are done in terms of preparing your team or running your team, all of those things. So I think he has brought a fresh attitude and a fresh look at the process to that organization. And I think that because they are having success, they are rallying around that, and you see a momentum building. As it relates to the quarterback, I'm not so sure that I can give credit to Brandon Staley for that. Look, Justin Herbert went out last year as a rookie and lit it up with Pep Hamilton as his quarterback's coach and Shane Steichen as his offensive coordinator. I believe this is just a continuation of someone who is extremely gifted, both athletically, both in terms of a football IQ, all of these things. And I don't think it's going to be long before Justin Herbert is one of the faces of the NFL. He is that talented. He is that passionate about what he does. Guys gravitate towards him. So the Chargers are a team to watch. If they stay healthy, there's something building there that they're going to be around at the end, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
What is your assessment of the way that the Chiefs have played so far this season? Are other teams in the league, have they figured them out a little bit more to a certain extent? It doesn't seem that teams are as scared of them as maybe they have been in the past.
It's funny, you lose a few games and everybody says you've been figured out or clubs aren't afraid of you. I think part of what I see with the Chiefs is defensively they've had some people out and they haven't been able to respond there. I mean, particularly up front with Chris Jones missing as much time as he has. And then offensively, I think, as Patrick Mahomes has acknowledged, he's been pressing in terms of trying to make the big play at times and to recapture that sort of momentum and excitement, if you will. And what teams are doing now are playing a lot of too deep, forcing the Chiefs to be patient, to go down the field and not get the big play. The other thing that has really hurt Kansas City, quite frankly, is turnovers. I mean, they are turning the football over at an alarming rate compared to what they have done in recent years. If they were to eliminate the turnovers, I would venture to guess their record would be significantly better than what it is at this point. So while I'm not ready to panic or give up on them, I do think that it is real in terms of the introspection that they're going through right now in terms of, hey, what's happening here and why? And can they reverse that? Sure. Will they reverse it? I'm not so certain, because I will say to you, other teams have gotten better, and momentum is a real thing in the NFL when a talented team starts to feel it and believe it.
I do want to get your thoughts. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but because you've covered the league for such a long time and covered a lot of teams intimately, I know you've covered the Falcons pretty intimately, the arc of Matt Ryan's career and what he's been able to do down there. And I kind of want to get your 30,000 foot view of quarterbacks in the league, some of the movement that we've seen from them. I think of Matthew Stafford and some of these other quarterbacks who have made changes. And then you've got, Matt Ryan with the Falcons organization, where individually maybe he's performed at a really high level, but just they haven't figured out a way to put it all together. And I know, that's much of the dismay of the fan base down there, where different factions seemingly have let the organization down at different times. I mean, do you think that Matt Ryan has made the right decision to stay with a franchise like that? He says publicly that, he's remained loyal to them because they've shown him loyalty. Or will that ultimately be a mistake?
I think that's a personal choice for each individual. Knowing Matt the way that I do, having had conversations with him in the past about not particularly this exact subject, but something close to it, I believe him in what he says. And you have to remember, quarterbacks are different from other players from this standpoint. Oftentimes, they are the face of the franchise. And what that means is that they have very close relationships with owners. And quarterbacks sometimes think long-term, not short-term, meaning once they're done playing, what's that relationship going to be like with the owner? Then from even a business standpoint, because remember, many of these owners have businesses beyond the NFL. And I have had Hall of Fame caliber veterans who have been with one team their entire career, who have opportunities to go elsewhere, tell me that it means more to them in terms of their post-playing career to stay with that one club, because they are now fixtures in the community, they are beloved in the community, they have ties to the owner, and there are business opportunities available to them because of that. So I'm not surprised at all that that Matt Ryan would go the route that he has gone. And I know of other players who have done similar things. So again, it's a personal choice. With the Falcons, anytime you change coaches, change the personnel department, it's going to take time. and they have some deficiencies there to get over, and they're trying to work through them. And hopefully they will work through them before Matt reaches a point where he's at that retirement age.
One last one for you, Jim. As you look at the league, I know you mentioned Chargers have a lot of steam right now. And, as you kind of think about who's going to be there at the end, I'm not sure we can say much more about Tom Brady than we already have. But as you assess the league overall, which other teams are standing out to you so far at this point in the season as teams to watch that will potentially be there down the stretch?
Oh, I think Dallas is playing really well. I think Buffalo is playing really well. I'm intrigued to see what happens this weekend in the Baltimore Chargers matchup and how that plays out. Baltimore has not played great, but the sign of a good team is you find ways to win when you have to, and they've been able to do that. And so I'm intrigued by the Ravens as well. Arizona is a club that people aren't talking about despite being the only undefeated team in the league. And I will tell you, if they can stay healthy, that's a dangerous team. So that's another one to watch. It's just fun right now. I know everyone wants to pick and choose who's going to win the Super Bowl now, but it's a long season. I know it's only 17 games, but it is a long season, and health plays such an important factor. I look at New Orleans. New Orleans is going to get back a handful of key players that have been out either all or most of the year, including Michael Thomas. And if those players come back and are able to play at the level that we're accustomed to them playing, that's a team you have to watch out for as well. So the truth is, it's just going to be a fun ride the rest of the way. And that's why we love the NFL so much, because, every Sunday matters, when there are only 17 games. It's not like baseball where you got 162 games and you can go through a lull and there's no panic. It seems like every Sunday is it's almost like life or death for NFL fans, and that's why they have what we call the overreaction Monday, because you're the best one week and then you're the worst the next. So it's just kind of sit back and enjoy it and enjoy the ride.
Jim, thanks very much for the time, for being with us, for sharing your thoughts with us. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate you having me.